again, about the vision of our church. We spent 4 Sundays just hammering on what we want to accomplish as a church. By preaching about the vision on a regular basis, that you continue to reinforce the vision that God has given you. So that should be it. With regards to just being able to translate the idea of preaching, sometimes it doesn't have to be formal preaching, but just like what we're doing in our cell groups, after the end of every cell group, we tell our people, this is the vision of people. We just want to encourage you to make sure that you're winning souls. We just want to make sure that you're praying that one of these days you'll be a discipler yourself. Just a constant repetition of that vision that you are hoping to accomplish in your church. And then number 5 is bring this vision to life. Meaning, if you already have agreed this is the direction of the church, then it should be embodied from the pastor to the next leaders, so that everybody will realize that, the church is really serious with this vision. We're going to live it out. What is so frustrating at times for many leaders is that when we begin to talk about this is what we want to accomplish, and then we don't back it up with our lives, people get frustrated, and a lot of times if we don't implement the vision that God has given us, it loses the credibility. Next time around, if you're going to say to your church, this is the vision, nobody will believe you anymore. Because you were not able to back up the first vision by living it out before your congregation, then it's going to have a problem next time around if you're going to introduce another vision. So make sure that you bring your vision to life. I remember, and this was something that we have done in our church. I'm not saying that you have to do it, but this is what our coach had told us, advised us to do when we started doing E12. After a year that we had to rewrite all the materials, and then we were already serious about the implementation, then we started telling all our ministry leaders, we're giving you 3 months to plug yourselves into our discipleship cell groups. From the praise team members to Sunday school teachers, all the elected officers of our church, we told them, clearly, if you do not plug in our discipleship, then you will have to relinquish your responsibility of being a leader in our church. Now, we made sure that we tell them you have 3 months to do it. Not, you need to plug in this week or else. But we gave them 3 months, and for some of our leaders, it was not something that they wanted to do, but we felt that we cannot compromise it because it will affect our implementation aspect. If we have people from our praise team or from our Sunday school teachers who would not align themselves in the vision of the church, then we could have a separate message that would be coming from them. Other people in the church would be able to say, we're not serious with our vision. How come this guy who stands in our church on a regular basis is not, part of the vision? Or if they would say, how come this deacon is not doing the vision? So you lose your willpower to implement the vision that God has given you. Some of the leadership would will not cooperate. So, and I'd like to emphasize this to all the leaders of our churches this morning. If it's clear to your pastor that this should be the direction of the church, if you're a deacon, a elected leader of your church, you need to be able to pray with the pastor and realize that this is really what God has given your church as a vision. And if it is, then you're not allowed to have your own vision for the church. It would be ridiculous for the pastor to lead the church to a certain direction, and then one of the leaders is leading the other half of the church to a different direction. No church would be productive if this is what's going to happen in our churches. Or, like in our church, we have several staff. We need to tell all our staff, you have to be part of this vision. Because you're not allowed to have your own vision if you're a staff member. You need to recognize this is the vision of the church. So we felt that that was a necessary part in implementing our vision. Our leadership needed to embody the vision so that we would be able to implement it properly. Okay? Other questions?
What's equal?
Well, equal is, of course, an option of G12. We had to create our own so that we could contextualize it according to our church. But we realized that E stands for the four phases of what we wanted to see in the life of our people: evangelize, edify, equip, empower. So if those four things can happen in the lives of our people, then we feel that we have done the vision that God has given us. We could empower them so that they'll be able to also become disciples of other people. Then we know that they have aligned themselves with the vision that God has given our church. Okay? Brother? As I said, it should be the senior pastor. Yeah, it should be the senior pastor. Well, I understand that we have some good leaders in our churches. And I'm just grateful to the Lord that even in BCI, the Lord has blessed us with great leaders. But if you're a leader in the church, you need to recognize that God has given you the leader that you need to be able to respect. Because the direction of the church will always be according to the direction that God has given, the main leader that you have in your church. Or else you rob him of that function of leadership. When you do not allow the pastor to be that leader, then you rob him of being the shepherd. You make him a sheep in the church, right? If he's the leader, then he's the leader. He should be the shepherd. And it would be ridiculous to see, the pastor trying to just follow the leadership of the officers in the church. Then he's not the leader of that church. Sorry to say, he's not the leader of that church. Let's continue. Calculation of God's vision. I wanted to, again, go back, talking about the calculation of God's vision, to Numbers chapters 13 and 14. And as I've said, you're familiar with this particular occasion when God has allowed them to send some men to explore the promised land. Now, I want us to be able to understand this because it's important that you and I see the practical approach does not necessarily contradict the spiritual vision that God has given the church. Meaning, you see, if we want our vision to be fulfilled, we need to also be able to strategize. We need to be able to establish some ways, specific ways, in order for that vision to be accomplished. And this is what we're going to see when God allowed 12 men to go and explore the promised land. And I just want to make it very clear, if you look at the slides, I'm stating here, their job was not to determine whether or not they have to go, because they need to go. That was the plan of God. And the plan of God is to give them the promised land. God could give it to them. So it's not whether or not it's possible for them to conquer the promised land. So when God allowed them to send these men to explore the promised land, their job is simply to determine strategies. How or what they need to do in order to conquer the promised land. Unfortunately, when some of these people went to the promised land, they were overwhelmed with the challenges. Those challenges could have propelled them to strategize. When they saw those giants, they could have said, well, since God is on our side, let's just ask the Lord's wisdom on how we could overcome the giants. Right? Now, I'm reminded of what we did as a church, and some of you probably would find this ridiculous. In 2006 or 7, Pastor Ed, when we went to Dallas and met Robert, up to 2007, right? Because we have that vision of buying a bigger property, the Lord has led us, Pastor Ed and I, when we attended a conference at Dallas, Fellowship Church of Ed Young Jr., he led us to meet this guy, Robert Richardson, who is a financial or stewardship consultant. And he has helped a Filipino church in Houston. And when I heard about him, the Lord had just impressed in my heart that we probably need to connect with him and see if we could ask him to come to BCI and help us fundraise. Now, because of our big vision, we needed to raise big amount of money. And during that time, or prior to that time, we had tried raising funds, like we would have small renovations in our church. We would be able to raise 20,000+, but with our vision of a bigger facility, we needed to raise millions of dollars. So in 2007, we invited Robert to come to our leadership. He made a presentation to our leadership, and he said that if he's going to come to help us, then he needs to charge us a certain amount of money. And if I'm not mistaken, we were charged $39,000 for his consultation fee. Yes, $39,000. And we realized that we needed to do this because we only have one chance of raising money in order for us to accomplish our vision. If we don't do it right, we would not be able to raise sufficient amount. And if we keep raising money, then our people would be tired of all the fundraising. Eventually, some of our people would leave. If you don't do the raising of funds properly, then people get tired of all the fundraisings. Bake sale here, garage sale there. So we said, okay, we're going to have a consultant who would help us raise funds, and our stewardship campaign will be for 3 years. And with his help, as a church, we were able to raise $1.2 million from our people. And during that time, we had about close to 200 people. Now, we felt that that was the strategy that we needed. And that strategy, might be difficult to understand. We're trying to raise funds, and yet we're going to pay someone $39,000. But at the end of the day, if not for this guy who God has really gifted, that God has already given so much experience under his belt on how to be able to raise sufficient funds, there was no way he would be able to raise 1.2 million out of 200 people. Right? Because I'm sure some of your churches have already done fundraising, and 1.2 million for 3 years, it's going to be really tough. But we praise God, that's behind us, and now we are in our new facility. But that was part of the calculations, the strategy of trying to accomplish God's vision. Numbers chapter 13, verse 27, that slide. It says here, then they gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here it is, or here its fruit. That particular verse talks about the report that Caleb and Joshua brought to Moses. And what is really important in this particular verse that I want to emphasize is, out of the 12 spies, the 2 who were really in tune with God's heart saw the vision possible. They were there trying to determine strategy, and they came back saying, let's do it. It's possible for us. So I know that sometimes we have some naysayers every time we present a vision in the church. I think the balance that you and I should have whenever there are some parts which are impossible in our vision, we calculate not based on what we're able to do, but what God is able to do on our behalf. And so, we are to be informed by the facts, but guided by our faith, just like Joshua and Caleb. They went there, they also saw the same giants, right? They also saw the same giants, but because they believe in the Lord, then they believe that it's possible. So here's a fact. In every vision that God gives us, there will always be giants. And it's true with BCI. I remember in 1999 when we decided we wanted to sell, we wanted to build a bigger staff, or a staff in our church. If I would go back to that time, that was one of the scariest moments in my pastoral ministry here at BCI. Because when my wife and I, after this vision was presented to the church, my wife and I went for a vacation. When we came back, there was a petition letter that we go back and undone the decision to pursue a new facility and build the staff. And we could understand people were scared, and one of the reasons why we don't need a staff, and I'm sure some of you can relate to this, one of the reasons is we only have few people. Why do we need more workers? And there was the accusation that probably pastor just wants to lessen his responsibilities and pass the responsibility to other people. Now listen, we felt that it was necessary for us to build the staff because the church exists not only for the people who are already inside. The church exists for the people that we still have to win out. And if there's only one pastor, And you can all understand this. If you only have one pastor, a certain individual could have a ceiling as far as his productivity is concerned. For example, if I'm the only pastor, perhaps my ceiling of my productivity